Welcome to class PM. The previous class we have studied about the animal tissues where we have learnt about epithelial tissue and muscle tissue. This class let us do with the connective tissue. So let us learn about this connective tissue. So as I've told you, the name itself, it's a kind of tissue, right? The name itself indicates a connection, right? So when I say like stay connected, what do you mean by stay connected? Like you try to be in touch with each other, but here it is not like this try to be in touch with each other. It's like they get connected to other organs of the body, right? So that means they act as a connection between the different organs of body. As I've told you, the name indicates that it is a connective tissue, which brings in a connection between the different organs. So let us see what are the general functions of this connective tissue. So the first main function is it supports and protects the body. Okay, it will provide support. At the same time, it will also protect the internal organs of the body. And the cells of this tissue which are present, they are loosely arranged. And you can see that these cells are embedded inside the matrix. Matrix is a space between these cells, intercellular matrix in the sense, the space between the cells is said to be intercellular matrix. Now, when we talk about this matrix, the matrix can maybe a jelly kind of matrix or a fluid, or it is dense, or it may be rigid too. Okay, and the function of this, the nature of the matrix differs depending upon the function of a particular connective tissue. So there are different types of connective tissues where each type of connective tissue has different types of cells with matrix present in it, and this matrix which is present in different tissues varies as according to the nature of the connective tissue and function of the connective tissue. Now let us learn in detail the different types of connective tissues. Connective tissue can be broadly categorized as areolar. So when you look at the different types of connective tissue, there are different types of connective tissue as areolar tissue, adipose tissue, bone tissue or bone cells, cartilage and blood cells. Now let us learn in detail about each of this connective tissue. So first let us begin with areolar tissue. So as I've told you, let us first begin with the first type of connective tissue, that is areolar. So areolar is usually found in between skin and the muscles, okay, and it is found around the blood vessels and nerves and bone marrow. Hope you all know what is bone marrow, right? Bone marrow is the place for the origin of blood cells, right? And it will also fill the space inside the organs and supports internal organs. So you know that different organs are aligned in our body or arranged in our body. See, when you look at a machine which is working in a factory, like when you look at a machine in a factory or industry, you see that this when you not only a machine, when you just try to open up your bike and see, there are different parts which are aligned together, assembled together, so that they can form one particular bike, right? In the same way, the parts of your body or the organs of your body are aligned in such a way that they all function normally and help the body to like carry out metabolic activities, right? So this alignment which is present or the arrangement of these organs, there will be definitely a space between the arrangement of these organs, right? So when you talk about like kidneys and your lungs, there is a space which is present between these kidneys and lungs. So the spaces which are present between the organs, internal organs, are filled up by areolar tissue. In the same way, this tissue which is present, it helps in the repair. Of our tissues. So it will help in filling up the space between the internal organs. We know that there are many internal organs which are present in our body. So the space between these organs is filled up by this areolar tissue. In the same way, it will also help in repairing the worn out tissues in the body. So this is all about your areolar. Then let us do with the next type of tissue, adipose tissue. So when you look at this next type of areolar tissue, which is adipose tissue, this adipose tissue is generally found below the skin and between the internal organs. We all know that the fat in our body gets deposited. Usually in case of men it is in the belly, right? And in case of women also it is most of the time into your what you call hip bones, pelvic bones and all, pelvic part. right? So we know that there is the food which we consume, if it has lot of fat, generally the fat is, if you burn the calories, if you burn the fat, that will not get deposited. Though they get deposited, they won't lead to any deposition into your internal organs, right? So the fat which is present around the internal organs is said to be visceral fat. What is it called? Visceral fat. So I hope most of you might have traveled through metro, right? And you might have traveled through many means of transport, right? And generally in these public places we find these weighing machines which will help you to know your weight. It was in olden days, like when you put a coin, drop a coin into that machine which has a circular disc and it keeps rotating with beautiful colors, and when you drop 1 rupee coin or 2 rupee coin, that will give out a small ticket which will tell you that this is the weight of your body, and you will be having some quotation which is related to your life. That was in olden days, right? But nowadays you have BMI machines, right? When you just check for this BMI, that is basic metabolic rate, BMI rates, you see that everything is covered under this, like your cholesterol levels, like your muscle strength and everything, right? So there, when you look at that, you see that the fat which is present is divided into two, visceral fat and muscle fat, right? So the muscle fat is which is deposited in your skin, right? But the visceral fat is the one which gets deposited over the internal organs, and you know, there is a great disadvantage of this visceral fat. It may lead to heart attacks. If it is like, not only heart attack, many other diseases also. So growing up with visceral fat is not that good. So please make a note that you keep checking your visceral fat so that there is no fat deposited between the internal organs. So this is, as I've told you, this is found between the skin and the internal organs. In the same way, this is actually called as a fat storing tissue because which is filled with fat globules. This tissue is filled with big sized cells which have fat molecules in them, Globules is nothing but the molecule. And you know, due to this storage of the fat, this tissue is also called or act as insulators. If you remember, mostly in chemistry and physics we learn about insulators. Insulators are those substances which will not allow the heat to pass out of the body, right? To come out of the body, if in simple terms, right? So they don't allow the heat to come out of its body. So as there is a deposition of this fat inside the globules of the tissue, that's the reason it will act as insulator. See, generally on a cold winter day, even if you don't wear your jacket, you may not feel too cold because the fat which is deposited under your skins will not let the heat to come out of your body. That means it keeps insulating inside. It will act as an insulating material so that there is no heat is lost from the body. That is how you keep yourself warm, right? And this woolen clothes, they are also insulators. When you wear woolen cloth, they will not let the heat to come out of your body. That is the reason you feel that when you wear jerkins and jackets, you feel warm, right? So the one who has lot of fat deposition in the body, you can see that they actually keep their body warm. And if we talk about, especially take examples of animals which are living in Antarctic regions and Arctic regions, like Arctic fox or seals. So you can see penguins, right? They have a thick coat of fur on their body, right? And this fur which is present, it will act as an insulating material, and they have a thick fat layer, adipose tissue layer under their skin, which is said to be blubber, That's the reason, though it is chilled there, like -degrees temperatures, the animal still can sustain because of a thick fat adipose tissue under their skin, which keeps them all the time hot, all the time warm. So this is all about your adipose tissue. So next, let us do with the next type of areolar tissue or connective tissue, that is bone. So the next connective tissue is bone. Well, we all know that bone is one of the important connective tissue which actually gives a proper structure to the body, right? Imagine if there are no bones in your body, right? How would it be your condition? Like you would have been drooped like this, right? You would, if you had no backbone, you would have just walked like octopus, right? So the network of bones is said to be a skeletal system, right? We all know that every animal or human beings, we have skeletal system which supports our body. At the same time, it will also give a proper posture to the body, that is proper shape to the body. Imagine what would be the condition if there was no bone in your body, and you would definitely not have the skeletal system, right? So this bone which is present, the main function of the bone is it forms a network or a framework. So now let us learn about the next type of connective tissue, which is said to be bone, right? So when you look at this bone tissue, we all know that bones form a network or a framework of skeletal system, right? And we know that if there are no bones in our body, definitely we would not had this erect position or a proper posture, right? We would have been octopus, we would have drooped down, and we would have walked like octopus or hydra with the tentacles, right? So these bones which are present, they will give a proper shape to the body, and as I've told you, they form a framework which will anchor muscles in the sense what? They fix firmly the muscles to the skeletal system. At the same time, they also support the main organs like your heart, your kidney, your lungs to stay in the proper position of the body. So you can see that all your internal organs are placed properly because of this skeletal system. That means they anchor or they provide the strength which is needed for the bone, which is needed for the organ to get attached, right? So as I've told you, this bone is a strong and non-flexible tissue. This bone tissue is a very strong and it is not flexible. See, if you want, can you just turn and twist and bend your bones in whichever way you like? Definitely not, because these are not flexible. They are not flexible. And the cells which are present inside the bone, they are embedded in a hard matrix. What do you mean by matrix? Matrix is nothing but the substance which will, like a fluid substance which will hold the cells together. A fluid substance which will hold the cells together. So every tissue has its matrix, and you see that the cells keep floating inside this fluid tissue or fluid matrix, right? So the bone cells which are present, they are present in a very hard matrix which is usually composed of calcium and phosphorus compounds. We all know, generally we keep hearing from our parents and from our adults, like calcium is very good for bones, building bones, right? And that is the reason you have to take more of calcium food, like you have to drink milk every day, and few people are take calcium supplements as tablets also. So that means this calcium and phosphorus minerals which are present, they help us in building strong bone tissues, right? And you see that there are several bones in our body. If you know that there are how many bones in our body, you can just, I think you all know there are so many bones in our body which are connected, right? We have 206 bones in our body, and you see out of these 206 bones, there are few short bones and few longer bones and few are very, very, very small, right? When I just take example of my arm, right? This has two different bones. From here to here you have one bone, and from here to here you have another bone. So there should be some connecting point, okay, which will help the bones to get attached to each other, right? So there is a flexible tissue, okay, there is a elastic tissue, tissue which is elastic in nature, another kind of connective tissue which is actually elastic in nature, and it has very good strength. That is said to be ligament, right? That is said to be ligament. You see that these bones are connected to one another. Say if I take example of my arm, when I just stretch my arm, I see that it is one single bone, but when I bend my elbow, I can feel this is one bone from shoulder to elbow, and from elbow to my arm, that is palm, there is another bone, right? So these bones meet at a point, and we know that this point is said to be a joint, right? So there should be a connection between these two bones, or else my hand would have hung like this, right? So the connection which is present between these two bones is made up of a elastic tissue which is said to be ligament. Generally, we know that this ligament cannot be mended, right? If you have an injury on your ligament, if there is a ligament tear, that cannot be operated. So please be careful that you don't cause damage to the ligament. And we know that our bones, our muscle which is present, you can see muscles on the outer surface of my arm, right? Even your body also. You know that your body is made up of muscles. Now we know that these muscles are also attached to the bones. They are also attached to the bones. So how are these muscles attached to the bones? Yes, they are attached by another connective tissue which is said to be tendon, Okay, these tendons connect bones to muscles. And you know, these tendons are fibrous. Fibrous in the sense they are thread-like structures, okay, which have a great strength, but they have very limited flexibility. They are flexible, but they are not very much flexible. They have limited flexibility. That means they can only stretch to a certain distance, right? So this is all about your bone tissue. Now let us learn about the next type of tissue, which is cartilage. So when you look at the next type of tissue, which is said to be a cartilage tissue, right? So this cartilage is the cells of this cartilage tissue are widely spaced. That means they have wide spaces in between these cells. And the matrix, as I've told you, if you remember, we have discussed the general characteristics of a connective tissue, where we have discussed that the matrix could be the jelly, or it could be a liquid, or it could be a solid, or it could be dense, right? In case of this cartilage, the matrix is a solid matrix, which is composed of proteins and sugars. And you know this, it smoothens bone surfaces at joints. So you have a joint over here, right? There is a bone surface over here. If the surface of the bones are rough, you would have heard that cracking sound of the bones, right? So these bone surfaces are smoothened because of this cartilage, and usually they are present in ear, nose, trachea and larynx. See, you see the flaps of your nose, yes, they are thick structures. You find that they are very thick like muscles. These are not muscles, but this is a cartilage. And when you touch the upper part of your ear, like this part, right? So this part of ear is nothing. What is this? You can find the upper ear is very tough, right? And this is not a bone, it's a cartilage. And this cartilage is also seen in trachea. You know what is trachea? It is a windpipe. And larynx is voice box, right? So this is all about the next connective tissue, which is said to be cartilage. Now, last but not the least, let us learn about the other important connective tissue, blood. The next important connective tissue is blood. So now let us all learn about blood. We know that we have blood present in our body, right? And for your information, this is the only fluid connective tissue in the body, right? See, when we just spoke about like areolar tissue, or when we have learnt about adipose, when we have learnt about the bones, we haven't seen these to be in the form of a liquid, right? But this is the only tissue which is present in the form of a liquid, and due to which it is said to be a fluid connective tissue. What is it called? Fluid connective tissue. And we all know that blood is red in color. And why is this blood red in color? Because we have added color to it? No, definitely not, right? So we don't add any colors, right? But this blood is red in color due to a pigment which is present, pigment called hemoglobin. Okay, there is a red color pigment called hemoglobin which is present in the blood, which makes the blood appear red in color. You know what is this hemoglobin made up of? Yes, I'll tell you. Hemoglobin is made up of two things, okay, iron and protein. Heme in the sense iron, and globin is nothing but there is a protein called globulin, and that protein, the protein will help in the formation of hemoglobin. So that's the reason whenever a person is anemic, the doctor will suggest to eat the food which has lot of iron, like jaggery, your leafy vegetables, your pomegranate, your beetroot, right? So generally we know the fruits like your figs, they are rich in iron. So the pigment called as hemoglobin is present, which will impart red color to the blood, And have you ever seen the clot of the blood? Have you ever seen the clotting of the blood? Yes, when you just go for a lab test. Say if you have to check a blood sample of yours, and you have to go and give your blood to the test, right? So you see that the person who is sitting over there will pull out the blood into a syringe, and they just drop it into a small test tube. And when you look at this, after the blood gets clotted, say like this is your blood, right? After the blood gets clotted, there is a clear fluid which floats on the surface. Okay, which floats on the surface of you can see a pale color liquid, okay, that is said to be plasma. What is it called? Plasma. After the blood gets clotted, you see there is a straw color liquid which floats above this clot, that is said to be plasma, and so you see that there is, after the blood is clotted, you can find the clear fluid which is said to be the serum. So the blood which is present, it has a fluid matrix called as plasma, contains fluid matrix called plasma. And you know what does this plasma has? This plasma has components of the blood, that is RBC, WBC and platelets. So this plasma which is present in the blood, it will have, okay, you can see these are suspended inside this liquid matrix like RBC, WBC and platelets. So the pigment hemoglobin imparts the color. At the same time, the fluid content, the fluid matrix, see in the previous one, like in case of bone, we have learned that it is a hard matrix, right? And in case of cartilage, we have seen that it is a solid matrix. And in case of blood, it is a fluid matrix where you see that the plasma has the suspended particles of RBC, WBC and platelets So you know that the blood which is present, it will help in exchange of gases. So this plasma membrane which is present, I've told you that it is a fluid matrix which is present inside the blood, right? So this plasma has the other cells like RBC, WBC and platelets which are embedded inside it or suspended. And you can see that plasma which is present, it contains proteins, salts and hormones. Protein, salts and hormones. This, see, when you taste your blood, you feel it is salty, right? Have you ever tasted your blood? Most of us do. When you have a small cut, you immediately put your finger into your mouth and you try to suck the blood in, right? So when you try to suck the blood in, once in a while or once in your lifetime at least, you might have tasted your blood, right? And definitely you might have understood that the blood is salty to taste, right? That is because of the presence of salts in plasma. And the salinity of this plasma in the blood is 0.09%. Okay, and you can see that the blood which is present, it flows throughout the body, right? You know that every part of your body has blood. It is not that only your face has blood and your arms don't have, your legs have blood and your body don't has, right? It is not like that. So blood flows and transports gases. We know that the oxygen which is being absorbed in the alveoli get diffused into the blood and are circulated all over the body, which will help in carrying the digested food, right? So they also see that they carry the digested food. And we know that the endocrine glands which are present in our body, they are called as ductless glands. And you know what does these ductless glands do? They produce various hormones which are responsible for growth in human body, right? Even in case of animals also. So they don't have any specific glands to store these hormones. What do? They directly pour them into the blood, release them into the blood. So this blood will have hormones also in it. And we know that in the process of filtration of urine, this blood carries waste materials to kidneys, right? And other different parts of the body. So this is how the blood will help. And when you just look at these RBCs, WBCs and platelets which are present in the blood, we know that RBCs help in carrying the transported materials like oxygen and food, and WBCs, they form the scavengers of the body because they fight against the microorganisms which enter into our body and kill them, so that they can keep our body healthy or protect from bacterial attack. And the platelets which are present, they form a network of cells around the cuts and bruises which you have, so that the clotting of blood takes place. So this is how the different cells of a blood can function, right? So this blood is said to be the important component of the body or important connective tissue, which is said to be a fluid connective tissue, If at all a question is asked, write in detail about the fluid connective tissue of the body, then definitely you need to answer it is blood.